Welcome to part 2 of my video on the UKIP leadership election, and in this section of the video I'll concentrate on one of the main contenders, John Rees Evans. Now, I first met John during the last leadership election when I got a phone call from his team saying he wanted to come down to Heathrow and have a look around and see what would be damaged by the third runway. And I've got to say, I was impressed with the guy. He came down with his team. It was a Sunday morning. I'd had a bit of a heavy night out the night before, and I was expecting it to be all about him, the video and me just showing him around. But in fact, and sorry John, you made me look awful because I looked ropey. He stuck me in front of the camera to get a proper handle on it, and I've got to say that's credit to him because he wanted to find out what was going on and he wanted to know, and he brought his family with him and they were all genuinely interested, and credit to John for that. That was that was much appreciated, and we're still, well, the community down here, we're still fighting, and we're not going to let them tarmac over a large part of our borough. But since then, I've got to admit, I've looked into a few things. Stuff's been brought to my attention, and let me say here, I've got no axe to grind because John's always been good with me. I like the guy. He comes across well. He's always been very pleasant to me. But if you're going to be the leader of a political party, you've got to be straightforward and upfront. And the media are digging around. We saw the thing from Guido the other week about the business in Belize. Now, that came up online. A lot of JRE supporters, well, he's done nothing wrong, it's all legal. Yeah, absolutely. And I've got no problem with it. All this about tax avoidance. You can only avoid tax, which is legal, if you're working within the law. And he is working within the law, so he's not done anything wrong. But at the same time, you can't go around at meetings saying that people need to pay the correct amount of tax and everything else when you're running operations out of Belize, helping companies to avoid tax. Like I say, not illegal, not even really immoral, but you can't turn around and criticise it. But I've done a little bit more digging actually, and what I found wasn't particularly pleasant. There are also, we've heard various things about him being a self-made businessman, but when you look into his businesses, most of them track back to a holding company in Gibraltar called Lewin Associates. And again, Gibraltar is a low tax regime, tax avoidance. He's not doing anything wrong, it's within the law, but you can't go around and say, oh well, we people have got to pay the right amount, and you're just going to be accused of hypocrisy. So the mainstream media, if he became leader, would jump all over him for it. As I say, Guido's already started. Then we've got the military career. Now, that's something that's been flagged up a few times. Him and his team have put posts up online, including on his website a certificate about him being best cadet during his 1-year parachute training. Now, I do some work with veterans organisations. I know a few people who have been in various regiments, and I spoke to a UKIP member actually last week who was in Paris, and what he said to me was, well, when they do the passing out parade, the best cadet gets mentioned in dispatches, you don't get a certificate. And I'm just looking at my PC now, and the certificate itself, and this is quite interesting, the one that he put up to prove it, it was done in such a way that it can't be modified, but it just doesn't look right to me. And please, John, come back and tell me that I'm wrong, and show me where this has come from, and please produce the original certificate with a picture of you online. In terms of his military career, I know that he was in the Honourable Artillery Company because I've checked with somebody I know who's in the HAC. He was in that for 6 months, but it is effectively a territorial unit. The thing that really worries me, especially in view of what happened to Paul Nuttall over the Hillsborough thing, which was put up by a member of his staff. It wasn't put up by him, but he got crucified for it. Is something that's on John's website, the Who is John Rees Evans website, about his involvement in Uganda. Now, I will quote from his website, and the website states: after leaving the British Army in early 2000, John was pursuing an expedition up Mount Stanley along a route that had for many years been closed off due to the presence of a terrorist group called Interahamwe. He offered a solution to flushing out the rebels and was assigned a platoon from the Ugandan People's Defence Force to launch an operation against the organisation, which had embedded itself in western Uganda following its expulsion from Rwanda. By this time, Interahamwe had succeeded in closing down much of the tourism industry in western Uganda for 5 years, following a series of massacres against British and American tourists in 1995. Having patrolled high into territory previously controlled by subversives, John summited the 3 highest peaks in Uganda to demonstrate that the operation had been successful in reopening western Uganda to tourism once again. He received recognition from the Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni for his contribution to the country. Since February 2000, tourism in western Uganda has continued to flourish and local businesses have begun operating and employing workers again. So I thought to myself, that's pretty stunning really if you've done that. So I thought I'd look it up online. And John went up those mountains with a friend of his, a guy called Neil James Tucker. And there's an article about it in the Daily Telegraph on the 21st of February 2004. And something in there kind of piqued my attention. Part of it said about Mr. Tucker, who is JRE's friend. He had climbed Mont Blanc, Europe's highest mountain, and in 2000 was so set on climbing Mount Stanley in Uganda that a platoon of soldiers escorted him to guard him from guerrillas. Well, hang on, I thought JRE was leading a platoon of Ugandan soldiers, not that they were going to escort him up the mountain. So I did a bit more digging, and I found an article, and this is dated 29th of February 2000, and it is from an African website, and it states the following: Kampala, 2 young British mountaineers who have successfully climbed Mount Rwenzori in western Uganda yesterday called on President Museveni at State House in Nakasero. Neil James Tucker and John Rees Evans, both 21, last night managed to climb the 3 highest peaks on Mount Stanley in the Rwenzori mountain ranges. The peaks, namely Alexandra, which strides into the Democratic Republic of Congo, Margaret and Albert, are over 14,900 feet high. The 2 mountaineers, during their meeting with Museveni, explained their ordeal when, due to poor visibility high up in the mountains, they failed to trace their way down to the nearest hut where they had left their guides. The meeting was attended by the Deputy Army Commander, Brigadier Joram Mugume, and the Secretary for Defence, Dr. Ben Abonyi, according to a statement from State House yesterday. The French news agency AFP said yesterday the 2 men were accompanied by 40 soldiers, but the troops stayed behind while the Britons scaled the final 2,000 feet of the 16,000 feet high peak. The British mountaineers climbed the highest peak of the Rwenzori mountain range as part of the Ugandan government's drive to convince tourists the country is safe for visit, AFP added. We were given a special privilege by Brigadier James Kazini, the Army Chief of Staff, to try and infiltrate the rainforests, Tucker said, according to AFP. The State House statement said Tucker and Rees Evans said they arrived in Uganda 2 weeks ago to climb Mount Rwenzori. Well, that is on a website called All Africa, and it's quoting from the press at the time. and it paints a completely different picture. So on John Rees Evans' website, he says that he was up there to flush out terrorists as part of an authorised operation from the government. That's not what the website says. It says, and the African press at the time, it says that they were going up the mountain and they were escorted by soldiers so that they could climb the mountain. That's, to me, please, John Rees Evans, I like you, you're a nice guy, but the difference between your account of it and what came out in the African press at the time is completely different. And also, it's interesting to note that round about the time where you've turned around on your website and said that the tourist trade has increased since, I'm sure that has nothing to do whatsoever with the UN putting extra money in as Uganda being a developing country that needed aid to assist them in building their tourist trade up. So this to me is a worry. If Paul Nuttall gets crucified by the press for Hillsborough, which was just something that one of his staff had put on his website, this is something that is on your website, and it completely disagrees with what is on the press in Africa at the time. It's a worry, John. Please can you come out and clarify, because I'm sure there's some sort of genuine mistake on there. I know you're a decent guy, but there are questions that need to be answered, and I think people should take that into account when they get their ballot papers, unless that answer is forthcoming, because there was also no answer to the Guido article the other week, despite the fact that I went online and asked for it. So I'll leave you with that thought, and have a great Saturday night, and catch up with you all soon. Bye.